All right, well, Mark, some economists say today's jump in existing home sales suggests that the housing market has indeed bottomed. Chris Mayer is professor of real estate at Columbia Business School. He does not agree with that assessment, and he joins us right now to discuss his housing outlook and the Fed's new proposals for mortgage loans and brokers. Chris, good to have you with us. Good morning.
Hi, Carol.
So, bottom or no bottom?
No bottom, unfortunately. There is just an enormous amount of headwind. The existing home sales are up for two reasons. One of them is they're a lagging indicator. They reflect where mortgage rates were several months ago, which was a lot lower, along with the tax incentives. And the second thing is that foreclosures continue to represent a third or so of these existing sales. So if you look at real arm's length transactions, it's at a number that's, we haven't seen for more than 20 years.
Chris, I've talked with Bob Schiller over at Yale, and he says, getting into the housing market, it's not a cheap one, it's not an easy one, unlike the stock market. And so that when you start to see some positive data points, it's significant. You don't buy that?
I think a small increase in existing sales on a month-to-month basis is not the same thing as the market bottoming. So I agree with Bob that there's an enormous amount of momentum, but I would also say that we're not really seeing data that shows a bottoming. I'll give you two other numbers. 1 in 5 homes in Florida with a mortgage is in some stage in delinquency and default, 1 in 7 in California, and we have a record number of vacant houses in the United States and are getting there on rental properties.
Chris, well, as you are no doubt aware, Fed Chairman Bernanke on Capitol Hill this week testifying before the House and the Senate, the chairman saying that it appears that the worst housing slump in 8 decades well, it might seem like 8 days to a lot of people, but it appears to be, he said it appears to be moderating. You don't agree with that sentiment?
Oh, I think moderating is different from there being a bottom, which is to say the rate of decline has slowed, but that is very different from seeing a bottom. And I'm afraid that if we don't do more in terms of thinking about foreclosures and payments, that the downward pressure due to foreclosures, along with the upward pressure on mortgage rates, is going to sort of pull away some of the slowing that we're seeing.
Right. What about this plunge in property values? How's that playing into this?
Well, I mean, obviously, property values are down enormously. In some parts of the country, they're down as much as 50% from where they were at the peak. The problem is we're also seeing credit tightening. More than 9 out of 10 private mortgages now require a down payment of greater than 20%. It's one thing to sort of ask people not to put no money down, but if what you're doing is continuing to tighten credit and make it harder for people to borrow,
right,
rates are rising, inventories are high, those aren't sort of signs of a housing market that's ready to turn.
And Chris, those days of a 20% down payment, even if you have good credit, those days are over, aren't they?
It's, if you have 20% down and you have credit, you will get a mortgage from somewhere. If you have 10% down, it's going to be a challenge to do it, but there are government programs that will allow that. And of course, we haven't even talked about the unemployment rate. Obviously, that's,
right,
that's very hard to see housing improve.
Okay. Chris, you make the case. You make the case for why it's still pretty lousy when it comes to the housing market. But so what do we do? I mean, how do we get the banks to maybe work through so that people can actually make their mortgage payments? What needs to be done? You've written about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is we're seeing loan modifications. The government program has about 325,000 of those. Servicers and lenders are doing a lot. I think the Obama administration is too optimistic in thinking we can prevent 3 to 5 million foreclosures. There's no evidence to suggest that we can do that much. But I am going to be doing some more work looking at trying to find ways to rent properties and to reduce some of this enormous pressure to foreclose and push properties on the market that banks are facing.
But does the administration need to put more pressure on those banks to work with homeowners, struggling homeowners, to refinance so that they don't have to foreclose? So there's not more houses on the market ultimately. Got about 30 seconds here.
Right. The problem that banks have is they're getting it from two places. If they don't make efforts to collect, they're going to have to write down mortgages and take losses.
Right, which they don't want to do.
On the other hand, politics are saying do the opposite. Banks are in a very tough position now.
All right, got to leave it there. So much to talk about.
Sure.
We could certainly go on for a while. Chris, thank you so much, though, for finding time for us today. Chris Mayer over at the Columbia Business